Good afternoon from us and good morning for you. My name is Eduardo Mena, Director at Ipsos and Gaming Lead, and I'm accompanied by Mark Richard, Associate Director and our Qual Gaming Lead from our media team. Here we are to present a few findings about what you need to know about gaming audiences beyond gaming. We're bringing information from wider gaming studies, Ipsos Global Trends, and trends analysis to suggest some trends that will shape the industry and have shaped it within the coming foreseen years. Also, as we progress, please feel free to drop questions in the Q&A chat. What we'll cover today, playing video games has changed and evolved with more companies joining in, driving new IP and exciting video games, broader and better tech being used in the making as an industry, and with more people joining in as game audiences. Therefore, we will give you a picture of who the gamers are nowadays, particularly in the main European countries, how much they engage with the overall gaming ecosystem, and estimates from revenue generated by gaming over time, as well as what the gaming audience care and expect from gaming companies and brands. You could also have a clear understanding of the shifting lines of what is and what isn't acceptable when it comes to tech and trust, to the point of view of the gaming audiences. This will give you some more references points and hopefully tools to better navigate the natural tensions created from these two important topics within the gaming ecosystem. Third, also we will show their views about gaming personal care and health, and probably future exciting opportunities for the industry and audience. All this will be showcased by examples and pieces of evidence from the industry that makes these insights and tensions evident within the gaming ecosystem, alongside with ideas or approaches on how can we help you to get deeper understanding from your gaming audience, so you can generate and reinforce deeper understanding and connection with your players. Where does our Ipsos knowledge is based from? And from each of these wider topics, we got key sources of Ipsos knowledge, which we had used to build this presentation. First, GameTrack, run by Ipsos on behalf of Video Games Europe, will give us an understanding on the video game audiences across key EU countries, understanding the size, evolution, and engagement of gaming audiences within the gaming ecosystem. Second, the wide and deep set of results across the globe, analyzing tracking key trends and macro forces that shape the world, all this through the gaming audience's eyes. Third, trends analysis, evidence and examples that bring to life how these signs, shifts, and forces are occurring within the gaming ecosystem. All these three bringing brought into this beautiful presentation, all for your eyes today. So to start with, let's start looking at the video game industry as an overall and their performance during 2024. And it is not a secret. The video game industry drives revenue and will continue to drive revenue over time. Based on broader estimates about the market, the video game industry generated around $140 billion or $188 billion during 2024. And it has been forecasted that it will grow to reach an over 150 billion pounds or $200 billion by 2027, and a strong 13% increase within the next 3 years. And within our Ipsos work, we have witnessed this growth through GameTrack, particularly across the European markets, on behalf of Video Games Europe. We can see how revenue from video game sales across these 5 main countries, UK, France, Germany, Spain, and Italy, have increased year after year from 14 billion euros to over 20 billion in 2024, an astonishing rise of over 40% on sales of video games within the last 6 years. And this revenue rise is driven by more people joining gaming over time. We have seen how playing video games on any device have increased and reached comfortably more than half of the overall population across these countries, with very similar shape and form across other regions of the world. Slowly but surely, gaming has risen from 49% back in 2012 to reach 54% during 2024. And we also expect gaming to keep the space with new hardware releases, as well as expected software releases within the next year or so. Portable revolution and appealing gaming services, either within the game or libraries of games, are on the rise, and in some ways are facilitating content discoverability and therefore access to more video games and IP. This rise on incidence means more gamers and a more diverse audience. Within the European 5 countries, there are around 128 million people who play video games on any device. And this number have increased by 12 million since 2019. And there are notorious increases across genders, but more importantly, the nowadays gamers gender is fairly balanced, with around 54 being male and importantly 45% being female players. Also, gaming has increased across all ages, but strongly across older adults, with nearly 1 in 4 now being aged 45 to 64, which is the same proportion of younger video game players who are key demographics, those aged 15 to 24 years old in these countries. Importantly, gamers are growing, but they also reinforce the gaming time. This growing number of players are devoted to the gaming ecosystem. They play for around 9 hours on average every week since 2012, which is actually a really good amount of time. This is despite a far more complex, granular, and competitive media ecosystem, with more options to access and consume content across streaming services, social media, video platforms, music, books, digital books, you name it, is content revolution that we have witnessed in the last 12 years. Despite this, gamers protect their time and commit to it to games they enjoy, week in and week out. We have also seen how gaming has risen in relevance across societies. Ipsos Global Trends show this. In our Ipsos study, we asked the world what are the usual weekly activities they do, from walking in the park, socializing with friends, online, offline, watching TV, or listening music. Playing video games ranks 8 across all these lists of activities, with around 2 in 5 playing video games on console, PC, or app games. Almost as relevant as socializing with friends than playing a sport or going to the gym, which I actually understand. Relevance is not only high and comparable with other wider social activities, but gaming is also increasing at global level year on year within our Ipsos Global Trends study. And with more contextual information and more data-driven, contextual information becomes more relevant. Ipsos Global Trend could bring and brings an extra layer or a full set of layers of understanding to the gaming audience. This comes from a really long-lasting conversation we at Ipsos have got with the world, interviewing over 50,000 people 41% claiming being weekly gamers. A study that we have been running for 10 years and 2025 progressing as we speak, and also across 50 markets amongst the overall adult population. This population represents 74% of the world population and 90% of the world's global GDP. And more importantly, we're going to have a view amongst the overall weekly gamers. Based on these weekly gamers, we're able to analyze all the key findings from our 9 big macro trends, coming from a large set of statistical values and more than 150 questions. Therefore, we will have a wider conversation with the world and gaming world indeed. And this is what I introduced Mark, so he will bring you key insights for these wider trends at global level.
Thanks, Ed. Yeah, so we've got 3 key trends. Obviously, there's 9 of them, but these are the ones where the most interesting stories came out, the most differentiated voices came out, and we heard the most nuanced perspectives of gamers compared to non-gamers. So we're going to walk through these. I want to introduce one kind of tension in the industry that I think comes up throughout that I think is really interesting to touch upon. And that tension is a issue with discoverability and a issue with a saturated market. And this is probably something that if you are in the games industry, you've heard about and you've experienced potentially. But we're in a position right now where it has become more and more difficult for gamers to find games. And in fact, there's lots of stats that back this up. There was an interview today that's gone live on the BBC with the boss of Supercell, the mobile game developer, and he brought this to life as well. His overall call was for companies to take more risks. And the stat he used to back that up said that essentially 60% of time spent on mobile games last year were games that are older than 6 years. And only 10% of that time spent were playing games that were developed in that last year. And there is a similar stat that you will be able to find for Steam games, which also shows that a majority of games played aren't actually being released. There's also the dynamic of this thing called a forever game, the Fortnites, the massive live service games that are driving a lot of time spent in audiences. And the ultimate outcome is that it is getting harder and harder to stand out. And it is getting harder and harder for any game to find a player base. So I think that's a really important context that we can go into these 3 trends: Technowonder, Power of Trust, and Conscientious Health. And we can build on that. And I'll bring that up throughout when it becomes relevant. Let's start with Technowonder. So this is one of our 9 trends. And this one, as the name suggests, is all about tech. And it is more so about the tension between tech, the benefits it gives us, the convenience it brings us, the entertainment and connection that it brings us, and the negative impacts that it does bring: privacy, job loss, potential misuse, all these things. So in a nutshell, the trend is, the tension is the beauty, convenience, and excitement of technology that often collides with potential threats and vulnerabilities. So that's the overview of this trend. And obviously, we're in the age of AI and the emergence of AI, and that's why this is very much front and center. So again, for each of these slides, for each of these sections, for each of these trends, I'll show you a few data points that bring it to life, and then I'll bring you a few trends and movements in the industry that can bring that to life a little bit further and show how that's being expressed. So this first one is very much a point on the fact that overall gamers, so gamers compared to non-gamers, are more technologically optimistic, and they do have higher hopes for Gen AI. So this first stat on the left here, the question was, or the statement was, we need modern technology because only this can help to solve future problems. You can see 75% of gamers compared to 69% of gamers believe that this is the case. And on the left here, both of them, both covering AI sentiment. The one in the middle, AI is having a positive impact on the world we live in. Again, gamers are more likely to believe this is the case, with 62% versus 53% of non-gamers. And then finally, technological advances like AI will create more jobs than they destroy, 51% versus 46%. So we're seeing here there is greater optimism amongst people who play games weekly. But that doesn't mean that they are not concerned. In fact, they are equally concerned as the kind of non-gaming population. With stats to the left and to the right here, I'm concerned about how information collected about me is being used by companies with 74 and 73, so pretty much on par. And the same goes for information and how it is being used by my own government. So we can see here, generally, the concerns about privacy are pretty much on par with the non-gaming population. Where we can see some differences is on this first stat, which is it is inevitable that we will lose some privacy because of what tech can do. And there we see an increase. We see 81% of gamers believing that this is the case versus 77%. The narrative that we can draw from this is that while they are equally concerned, there is a greater tech-savvy approach to this that means that gamers understand the trade-offs that have to come in place when new technologies and productive technologies like Gen AI are introduced, that there will be trade-offs and that they need to be made. So overall, what this expresses is this tension between that positivity, but the understanding of what the implication is. And in gamers, we see that that implication might be more clearly defined than with broader audiences. On this slide, I'm going to show how that manifests itself in a few different ways. And the overall tension is this idea that gamers are cautiously excited for the potential of AI to bring new wonders to gaming, but the excitement is tampered by the potential side effects. And obviously, that's something that everyone's experiencing here. The first one here focuses very much on that excitement. It is the fact that there is an appetite for genuine new experiences. And if anyone reads that BBC article from the Supercell boss that they published today, he makes a similar argument that saturation can only be beat by one force, and that is innovation, and that is new experiences. The first point here then says that gamers have an appetite for this and they are seeking new experiences, and that there is a bit of a sense of stagnation in the market. We are definitely in an iterative cycle versus a cycle that is taking lots of leaps in tech. And we're seeing some gaming experiences that are already bubbling up in terms of Gen AI having the potential to create that excitement. The first is very much in an experimental space, and it is in the modern community, meaning gamers who modify existing games. And we can look towards the very popular and recently re-released Elder Scrolls Skyrim, and we can see that there's a modding community that has already integrated Gen AI into the program, meaning that non-playable characters, so characters that are in the environment, can be interacted directly with a microphone, and they will respond with natural language. This is just a modification of an existing game, but it is a way that it is already being experimented with, and it has drawn a lot of interest on social media, so there is interest there for sure. What is potentially more interesting is what we might call that first wave of native Gen AI games, so games that are including elements of gameplay that introduce Gen AI from the very ground. And what an interesting example of this is a game called Mimesis, which is currently live on the Steam Demo Fest. And what it essentially is it's a very popular genre right now. It is an online cooperative 4-player kind of horror survival game where players are on microphone and communicating with each other to complete tasks in an environment. The Gen AI twist is that the game is picking up the audio and is able to replicate that audio, as in replicate the voice pretty much pitch perfect. And it's also measuring what you say and how you say it, the types of words you use. And the outcome is, in a game where you're trying to figure out and work together with other players, the game will introduce AI imposters into the space, meaning you will have to guess, is this actually my friend I'm playing with? Is this the AI? And the AI will try to lure you into awkward situations and will also ultimately, it is a horror game, will try to kill you. So this is an example where it's already getting some positive buzz, an example where real Gen AI is being integrated into actual gameplay rather than, let's say, coding or voice acting or anything to boost the development. It is actually being integrated into gameplay. And there's an interesting place here, and there's appetite for newness, and Gen AI has the potential to give it. Now, to express the tensions a little bit more, and many will be aware of this, there is a strike ongoing. It looks like it is going to come to some sort of conclusion with some sort of foundation being formed, but voice actors have been striking against the implementation of AI and the possible results of this. What we have seen is that the gaming audiences have in many ways been vocal and have stood up for the power of human authorship and artistry. And that is, I think, a positive movement for the industry, but it also represents a bit of a tension. What I think is going to be interesting to see going forward is, yes, they will stand up for the people who literally voice their favorite characters on screen, but will they do the same thing for the people who sit behind the code, who sit behind the art, who are not front-facing, who are not charismatic actors who can, move a nation essentially? So there is a tension. They will stand up for authorship and artistry, but there's a question of how far that goes and how far they will push. The third point on this is raising a term that maybe people may have heard a lot more of, which is this term called AI slop. The most common use of this term, is kind of an emerging term, is on video platforms where more and more we are seeing content, and you may have seen this, that is clearly from the ground up, pretty much entirely AI generated, AI video, AI voice. Everything is AI, and it's being pumped out at a quite big pace, and it's being pushed around different content platforms. While obviously making a game takes longer than making just a video you can post on YouTube, there is an influx of heavily AI generated games hitting certain parts of the market. And the screenshots above are from a recent Steam, the PC platform, demo fest, where you can see a lot of fairly generic games with heavily Gen AI generated and augmented content. And this caught a lot of headlines and caught a lot of forum posts in Reddit. The implication here is we just set the context saying there is a discoverability issue in gaming and some games never find their player base. There is a worry here that this Gen AI slop moving into gaming and having really low quality content saturating an already saturated market, that we will further have issues and we will increase the difficulties for players to find the games that they love. So that is another potential implication. So we've got two factors here. We've got the positivity of it is a source for new experiences, and then we have the tension of what could this mean for the broader market and for the people who work in it. And that, in very many ways, exemplifies the whole thing. Some key so what's for this section. So what does this mean for us? First one is the need to track the shifting lines of what is or isn't acceptable across AI. So a need to understand exactly where gaming audiences' minds are at and where it can or cannot be used, or shouldn't be used, or should be used with caution. We have actually run this piece of research with the BBC across all of their content places, different categories like news and sport, and should it be used in editorial? Could it be used in different places? And we established for them where the lines are. And this is a report that we can actually share with you in the chat at some point so you can look at it. But it's a really interesting piece, and it draws into the picture already what may need to be done at a gaming industry level to understand really where are those lines, what is tolerable and what is not tolerable from AI audiences, gaming audiences. The second point is this maybe general guidance of finding ways to integrate AI that does not mimic or replicate human creativity, because we know that this causes difficulties and potential brand implication, but finding these ways of creating entirely new experiences that are never could have been created unless it is for AI. So these really positive, innovative uses of it, and pushing towards those and trying to be careful with the other. Because the final point is that gamers are excited to experiment with new tech. And we see when these things came out, Fortnite, for example, had a release of Darth Vader as an AI character. And there were some, the gamers will push the boundaries of that, and you can find clips of that online. But overall, lots of people showed up to play with it. So the audience will experiment, and they will want to experiment with you, but you need to be really clear about the implications and before you do so, and be able to communicate that. That brings us actually quite seamlessly to the next trend space, which is called the power of trust. And obviously in a world with AI, the power of trust has become slightly more emphasized. The specific tension here is that as trust becomes a little bit more erratic, as it becomes more difficult to understand who we can believe and who we can't, who's leading us astray, the truth and trust becomes a lot more important as well. So there's very much tension between a rapidly evolving world and the increasing need for trust in a space that is so volatile. A few ways that it comes to life. I'm going to start with this this point on kind of overall trust as what we can call a currency. The understanding in many ways is that trust can be a make or break currency in the gaming ecosystem. And we can think of many, many ways in the past that this has come to fore. And we have some stats here actually to back that up from the global trends data. We know that the statement, I'm more likely to trust a new product if it is made by a brand I already know, is 84% of gamers believing that and only 78% of non-gamers. So a bit of an increase there. The same goes for I'm generally willing to spend extra for a brand with an image that appeals to me. That's 61% compared to 52% of non-gamers. I think the power of trust is a really interesting space. And I think we have just had a console launch. And I think it is a great analogy for the power of trust. When gamers buy into a console launch, they do not just buy the here and now. They buy a promise. They buy a promise that a company will deliver on a vision. They buy the promise that their needs might not be met fully at this point, but over the life cycle of said console, that need will be met. There is trust implicit in this. And to put a name to it specifically, one of the big eroding factors on trust right now in this moment is price, and it is monetization. That is what is eroding trust in the system and has for the past couple of years. And if we are really specific here, we obviously know that Nintendo had a lot of chatter going on about price. We now also know that in the US, the Switch 2 broke all week one launch records. So we can see, obviously, Nintendo, it is a testament for a brand that has an extremely strong relationship with their fan base and a lot of trust. And we can see that even points like price can be overcome by an extremely robust trust in a brand. So I think just the same goes for live service games. I will buy or monetize, I will buy cosmetics. My trust lies in you to maintain that service and make sure that the investment I've made in it can be used going forward, hopefully for years to come. So trust is a really important currency. And we think that in this kind of turmoil that the industry is seeing, the monetization tension, this trust has been eroded, but we believe that building trust can be a competitive advantage. And obviously that is coming to life in a few ways. The first point is a more general point, and that's just to say, in a place where the place we are with the tensions that we're seeing around AI, around monetization, around the turmoil, potential difficulties that different companies are facing at the moment, this need for transparency and clarity of communication is more important than ever. And we see lots of cases of trying to communicate on a level and trying to be honest with the progress or the issues that the developer or manufacturer is facing, a brand is facing. We see that usually pays dividends if you're trying to communicate on a level. So that's a general guidance here. But more specific than that, I think we can see in terms of strategies of building trust, a strategy that we now know has been really effective over the past year and, to some extent has been effective as long as the industry has been around, is that exposure to people behind games is what really drives trust. So we have a couple of ways that this has come to life in the last couple of months and year. So two high-profile cases of Sven Wittke, of Larian, Baldur's Gate makers, and Duce from Team Azobi, Astrobot developers, Sony adjacent, both critically acclaimed games who had a lot of time on award show floors the last year. And both of them used their platform to have really kind of poignant and highly publicized moments where they're bringing a spotlight on the people who made the games and the industry who makes the games. And we can see that those are moments that were really powerful in building trust with those people, obviously, but that has an extending power to also kind of lend that trust to the publisher, lend that trust to the manufacturers. So that's a really important point. And I think the other one, everyone's talking about Expedition 33 and still is, but I think it's another really good example of trust being built through proximity to kind of really putting the developer base in the forefront. And that is, if you look at their release strategy, both post and pre, obviously the game speaks for itself. It's an amazing game. The critics have been extremely favorable for it. So that does what it does. but we can see in their release strategy, both post and pre-release, that there was a lot of work to bring the developing team front and foremost, just out there, the three key people, but lots of pictures, lots of videos in their studios. Obviously, it was a bit of a David and Goliath story that they tried to tell, but we can see that it really worked, and there was a lot of goodwill towards them. So another example of that exposure to the people actually doing it being really, really advantageous in building trust. The final point on this form of trust is that more than ever, we can actually have gaming developers, manufacturers can actually have a dialogue between players and developers. And there's a lot of examples of trust being earned. And this a great example is No Man's Sky and also Cyberpunk 2027. We will all remember a quite difficult, turbulent start to their releases, and not necessarily finding the audiences that they want to and getting the critical reception that they want to. But we can look back at all that now, in some cases almost 10 years back, and we can say, well, they are both certified hits and extremely positive receptions from critics. So it is the example that connection, that conversation, that dialogue is extremely important, and being in touch with your potential players, your players, can mean that you understand exactly which levers to pull to earn that trust and build that trust again, and it is possible. There is another expression of the power of trust, which focuses a little bit more on the voices that build trust and the forces that users and game audience use to build trust. And we've got two stats to introduce this. So the first stat is the statement, if I don't feel confident making a purchase, I will look at online reviews. 85% of gamers believe that this is the case, with 77% of non-gamers thinking it's the case. So higher for gamers. And the same goes for, I can find better deals shopping online than shopping in traditional stores. So 78% compared to 69% of non-gamers. What does this tell us? We've already said that the gaming marketplace is noisy. People shopping online means they're shopping on the various platforms. Could be Steam, could be different manufacturers' platforms, various third parties. But what we know about those is they are hard to navigate, and we know that games are getting buried. So here we are. So where do they go to try to cut through that noise? They seek trusted voices, and we know that, and they do so more so than non-gamers. The tricky situation is, in such a kind of increasingly saturated market, where trusted voices are arguably more important than they have ever been, it's also a situation where they are more in flux than they potentially have ever been. And there's two different ways that comes to life. And the first one is a focus on millennials and Gen Z, millennials and Gen X primarily. So the older generations like myself, who are also currently driving a majority of the spend in the category and are being catered to much more actually than the younger audiences. But what is happening with them at the moment? They're actually in a space where a traditional games media format has always existed in their lives. If it was magazines back in the day, the early sites of websites, we know that they have followed these websites potentially their whole lives. And we have recently had a slew of shutdowns and changes of editorial teams, with a really high profile one being the website Polygon, which has recently completely restructured and let it go a massive amount of editorial team. So what does this mean? It means that a lot of the traditional source of trust, the pillar of trust that they have built, is changing at the moment. And we're not going to say that they're, it says void, they're not getting completely disrupted and are lost, completely, but it does mean that how they find trust is changing. And these people who are no longer in traditional games media, some of them moved out of the space and are no longer reporting on games. But what we're also seeing is that these editorial teams have splintered off into different places and have created more individual presences like YouTube channels or Substacks, where they are now catering to a niche audience that followed them from the original platform out to another place. So the big point here is there is a change happening, and it's a change to, as I said, a pillar of trust that these two generations have had for most of their life. And we have to keep an eye on what is happening and how these layoffs and this disruption to the traditional media industry is going to change how gamers of these generations find what they need to find. The flip side of the coin is the younger generations, but also obviously transitioning into older generations where this behavior is also becoming more likely. But Gen Z, Gen A, that social discovery, that increase of looking for genuine connections. I say genuine, obviously a closer, more authentic connection for recommendations and for discovery. We know in general, social is becoming a bigger discovery platform, and the same goes very much for games, where we know, and this is very much what TikTok is driving at the moment, there is lots of stats backing up that game discovery is really being boosted by TikTok, and there's lots of success stories already of games who managed to do that. The interesting thing here, of course, is that's going to keep moving, and we know that as the platform that gives the most exposure to games changes, it actually can also change more than that. So we know that the influx of streamers, for example, didn't only change how we reach audiences, it also changed how games are developed, because we now develop games that are going to catch interest from the streamer community, because we know that boosts the potential reach. So it's interesting to keep an eye on this and say, okay, where are they getting trust? How are they doing it? Increasingly social. How do we play into that? But it's also interesting to keep an eye on what beyond that will that change in terms of where the audience is and how they inform themselves. 3 so whats that kind of pin this section down. First one is the point that trust is an important currency, and considering how actions build or erode trust can be really important in understanding how you can reach audiences or what might be getting in the way of you reaching audiences or convincing audiences. The second point is the understanding that the ecosystem of trust in gaming is changing, and that we need to keep a finger on the pulse here to make sure that we are aware of where we need to be to capture the audience that we want to capture, and make sure that they have the trusted sources they need to make a decision in a saturated market. And on that note, what can we do to help the gaming audiences cut through the complexity of games discovery? What is there? What is happening? What can we do personally as a brand, as a manufacturer, as a developer to help cut through the noise? The final trends platform is one of Conscientious Health, and it comes to life in many ways. We have of example on the right here with a Ring Fit, a kind of probably the most recent release, fitness release from Nintendo, and that kind of physical health in gaming is still extremely relevant. So we're seeing that 87% of gamers compared to 82% of non-gamers say, I need to do more to look after myself physically. But what's interesting and what is potentially the new facet is that this trend very much speaks to the fact that there is a more holistic look at health, and increasingly so, and that tech might be at odds with this. And we can see that 84% compared to 79% of non-gamers say, I need to do more to look after my mental well-being. So that's an interesting facet that is built on that. And the final point is that 82% compared to 78% of non-gamers say, I would like more control over decisions about my health. So we're seeing more relevant for gamers, these mental and physical health challenges and how that meets tech as well. A few ways that comes to life. And while physical health remains a big opportunity, there is this new mental health positive gaming experience that is currently driving a lot of growth and has done so for the last five years. We'll start with that. So some of you may be familiar with the term cozy games, also known as wholesome games. The overall thing here is that it is a broad genre. Some people challenge it being a genre, but overall it is this environment of low pressure gameplay, positive emotions, and a focus on relaxations and connections, and often kind of positive stories of reflection. So an entire genre that's popped up around it. And we can look back at Animal Crossing, New Horizons, and its success during lockdown as an example of this, but also the certified indie mega hit with 41 million copies sold of Stardew Valley, which is a kind of farming simulator focused on community and improvement. Each of these experiences where you can find countless testimonials online of people saying, this is my way of managing myself when I have low mental health moments, or this is my way of escaping. And we know that this is the case. But what's interesting here is we have a genre now. Before, games in general can be used to manage low mental health moments. That's the truth. It's escapism. But we have experiences now which target that to a much greater extent. And that is a very interesting trajectory, and it needs to be understood how more brands can go into that. Not everyone will be able to, but it is an interesting inspiration for understanding how gamers are engaging with this and how we're attracting new audiences with this new type of experience. In terms of the more physical side of it, there is a need here to track what is the next meaningful leap in fitness gaming. And what we know about fitness gaming, it is very much in loop with hardware changes. So it's interesting to think about, okay, what is the next step? We know that motion controls drew a lot of different fitness applications. VR had a big use case. And now we're asking, what is next? Well, just this past weekend, Meta announced their Oakley partnership, creating more sports-focused smart glasses. Now, obviously, this first iteration might just be focused on performance and sport, but we can easily see how an augmented reality, a smart glasses view could be then pushed into a more gamified space, and there could be gaming applications in that realm. So that's a potential way to go. We also now have the improved motion controls of the Switch 2 and the slowly building user base there, and the existing user base of Switch 1. So another platform where motion controls are core to the experience, and it is ready potentially for new fitness applications to be built. The point here is overall, there is demand still. They want to improve, and there is an opportunity to be had here, but we need to understand where is the market moving. The final point is just overall this need for the ecosystem as a whole around gaming to protect both the health, both mentally, to some extent physically, of gamers. And what we mean here is, while people come to games to connect with their friends, they come to escape, to come to create connections, we also know that there are negative mental impacts, mental health impacts from gaming. And that is obviously just playing online, more so for women, where we know that they have more toxic behavior pointed at them, and some people don't feel like they can be part of those communities. We also know that there can be predatory monetization strategies, gaming designs that play into addictive habits. There's loads of spaces here, and it is generally the need for us as people in the game ecosystem to understand who we're catering to and what we are doing to protect them from others and themselves and their habits. And that's the broader trend here that needs to be thought about. And not only game developers, but also people in the ecosystem, like a Discord and like a Twitch, who also play into the overall ecosystem. Final so what's before I hand back over to Ed is, the first one is, consider to what extent your brand can deliver mental well-being positive experiences. The second is, understand the role your brand is playing in helping gamers set healthy habits and to protect them from potential threats. And the final one is the point on keeping a finger on the pulse of tech to make or ride the next wave of gaming fitness. And I'll hand over back to Ed to close up and sum up.
Oh, thank you so much, Mark. Very telling in terms of all the analysis and the trends that you have seen. And I think I could summarize this amazing presentation and all the points in the same three images, 3 points that we were looking at the beginning. First, gaming is large and will be larger in the future in terms of revenue generated, gaming audiences, and sustained engagement from the video game players. Revenue will increase because more people will play video games over time and they are loyal to the medium. And the gaming audience is more diverse and varied over time, reaching broader demographics and changing the image of the gamer in your mindset to everyday person all over the world. Second, Ipsos Global Trends adds layers of understanding to the gaming audience. The gaming audience is more tech savvy, therefore have greater hopes for AI use and development. They are also more aware of the given trade-offs in terms of data privacy, but they are also not as concerned as everyone else about those trade-offs. Gamers have generally higher trust on brands they already know, on the gamers they already play, and the IP they already enjoy. This makes trust a strong currency for gaming brands and IP also to be gained and sustained over time. Players seek for trusted voices to cut through the noise in order to discover the games they want to play and engage with. Third, physical and mental health are more relevant for video game audience at overall level, and it could be considered an opportunity for some or most. Cozy gaming it has been discovered and is on the increase. More mental health positive experience are on the rise. Mixed reality we have seen tied to hardware releases. It could be a virtual play field to reality and bringing the sport game community to the people in virtual active spaces. And talking about these virtual active spaces, an ecosystem, the industry should take care of those spaces in order to care for the gaming audiences. And I think I can summarize this at overall level that here at Ipsos, we live, we play, we enjoy gaming, and we also work with gaming clients. And if you found this useful, our gaming team will love to come and talk to you and team to explore how can we collaborate to achieve your goals and your company goals into this broader gaming ecosystem to reach the audiences that really matter. Thank you so much for your time and open the floor. If there is any questions at all, more than happy to come.
Getting it. The voice off screen is shaking his head. So there are emails on the screen here. If you have, maybe take a picture of them. If you want to reach out to us about anything here, or if you want to have any more follow-ups on this, or more members of your team want to see this, then please reach out, and we can definitely make that happen. But yeah, no other questions? No other questions. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time. And yeah, go back and talk to you really soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.